Hi, everyone. Welcome to Network Capital TV. Today is a very special day for me because I get to host my friend and entrepreneur, Manal Kahi, who's doing extraordinary work at the intersection of food, technology, and a great humanitarian crisis that we are facing today. So, Manal, welcome to Network Capital. Tell us who you are and what do you do today?
Thank you so much, Utkar. It's such a pleasure for me to be here. I know we met a few years ago, and I'm so honored to be part of this community in a sense. So my name is Manal, like you mentioned, Manal Kahi. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Eat Offbeat. We are a food company that delivers authentic meals that are entirely conceived, prepared, and delivered by refugees resettled here in New York City.
How did you get to this point? Because you're a SIPA graduate. Walk us through your journey. Like what took you to policy school? Why did you apply? And how did you take the offbeat path of building Eat Offbeat?
Yeah, good one. So I'm originally from Lebanon. I was born in Lebanon. I studied environmental management in undergrad, and I was working in environmental consulting for a few years. And, you know, I did some time in Europe, then back in Beirut, and was mostly working in the Middle East, at least right before moving here to New York City. And I started kind of hitting a ceiling back in Lebanon. So I started looking at opportunities to kind of go abroad or maybe try to expand my network a little bit. And that's where I decided to move to New York City or at least I applied for graduate school at the School of International Public Affairs at Columbia University here in New York. I kind of wanted to go for international climate policy, be a bit more involved on the, in multilateral. So that's part of why I chose New York City. And luckily, after a lot of work, applications, I'm sure everyone here kind of knows more or less what it takes as a foreigner to kind of apply for graduate school, all of those things. But basically, I went through the entire process. Luckily, I got admitted, figured out a few scholarships, ways of funding my stay and my studies, and ended up
very expensive study, right? Very expensive study.
Very expensive. Yeah. I often wonder if it's worth it or not, but I definitely think it is. Anyway, long story short, moved to New York City, and then I started the graduate program with a very different path in mind. Friends would say, "Oh, can you make your hummus? Can you bring your hummus? We have this party, we have that," and everyone really loved it, even though I'm not even a great cook, right? But it was kind of made at home, made with love. There was a story to it, and that made it successful. So maybe just for a bit more context, that was 2013, 2014. It was the midst of the refugee crisis back home. So I was feeling there was a bit of a guilt, I would say, in the back of my mind for having left the country, not being able to do anything about it back home. And there I was here in New York thinking of who could bring really good hummus to New York City. So when we started thinking of literally asking ourselves who could make better hummus, who could bring, we saw some sort of a market gap here in bringing better hummus to the market. And when we thought of who could fill that gap, we thought of Syrian refugees being resettled in New York or in the US at that stage. And knowing the community, I know, knowing the culture, it's mostly people who would want to share their food with their host or with whoever actually is sharing a table with them. And this is really where kind of the idea came from. So initially we wanted to bring better hummus to New York, and we wanted to have that hummus made by Syrian refugees being resettled here. Obviously with the changes, and things kind of evolved, we started looking at the market for hummus, already oversaturated in New York. And we thought, why not make it a bit more global, right? And find refugees from all over the world who are also willing to bring all these other recipes that just like hummus are so much better when they're homemade, when they're made by, made with love by someone who really knows how they should taste like back home at least. And that's how Eat Offbeat was born.
Yeah. Well, today it's become quite a sensation. And, I can tell you that there's a huge demand of Eat Offbeat in different parts of Network Capital. I mean, once we announced that Manal was doing this podcast, so there's demand for that in London, in Paris, in Berlin, India as well. So clearly we're going to explore that. There's lots of market expansion opportunities there. But Manal, let's trace steps back a little. When you applied to SIPA, you were mostly looking at environmental policy. Entrepreneurship is not what you see policy graduates do immediately. So when you were applying to SIPA or while you were at SIPA, What were the career options that you considered? And was entrepreneurship anywhere in your larger horizon?
Not at all. I've never seen myself as an entrepreneur. It actually took me a while until I started even calling myself entrepreneur, or seeing myself as an entrepreneur, even after I had started Eat Offbeat. I never did. Most entrepreneurs, you hear their stories, they always tell you, oh, they've been selling since they were 5, they did lemonade stands, all of that. I actually never did that. There was no one in my family. I come from a family of academics. My mom is a social worker, right? So I had never even considered that as a path. And when I was at SIPA, it was really more about policy. Like I mentioned, I was in environmental policy. I wanted to be more involved in international climate agreements. So that was really the path I was looking at. I wanted to, find ways to work in multilaterals. That was really what I was focused on. But I've always been someone who kind of, when I see an opportunity along the way, if it's something I feel passionate about, I feel strongly about, I go with I often ask myself the question of why not? That's really my philosophy. I kind of felt like there was an opportunity there. And, genuinely I told myself, why not? Let's try that. And the worst case, I can always go back to the policy world, right? Even if I take a year off, try to do this, fail miserably, all I would have lost is maybe a year, but I would have gained so much knowledge, so much experience, so much like a huge network, right? So that's really was kind of how I approached it in the early days. Is this answering your question?
Yeah, because many people on Network Capital apply for policy programs or apply to MBAs, and when you apply, especially in the policy program, many people want to take the international organization route or the writing policy. But increasingly, it's becoming really difficult for international folks to do that, even for people who are local to do that. Opportunities are few. You don't really get permanent positions. Even the salary is not really up to the mark in many cases. So your case also demonstrates that policy graduates can actually use their curiosity to do something different. It'll be very helpful if you start talking to us about the early days. Was the idea born at Columbia or after that? You and I met at the Penn Columbia Social Impact House, which is in a way where, both our ideas, yours and mine, took off or took some shape. But that was 2015. I know that you were tinkering around that time, but I would love for you to explain those early days to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're totally right. Usually kind of policy school is seen as a silo where you're not necessarily supposed to be entrepreneurial, but I think that's starting to change. And I think it's a much smaller community at SIPA, actually, at SIPA specifically, that felt like they wanted to do something a bit different from policy. Right. And I think that community is growing more and more. So now when I go back sometimes to a social class, like it's a much bigger community. Don't necessarily have to be simply in policy, and that don't necessarily feel like policy is different from social entrepreneurship. But there can be a lot of intersections, if you will. You don't necessarily have to always be in the public sector and really frown on the private sector. Like there are ways to kind of combine your policy expertise in a way that benefits, let's say, in a public setting, or is beneficial on both ends in a sense.
Right.
So going back to your question of how it started, it did start while I was exactly in my first year. I think towards the end of my first year at SIPA, I did a 2-year program.
Right.
So in my first year, that's when I generally, it's the story I told you, like the hummus thing, right? I started making it. And this is where I was taking a class on social entrepreneurship with Professor Sarah Holloway, who is still an advisor.
Yes.
Yeah. And a great
is that right? Yes, that's amazing. I remember her from PSIH. Yeah.
Exactly. So she was with us at the school. I mean, the 2-week program we did together. Basically, I had taken one of her courses, and I kind of started the idea of Sarah herself is very entrepreneurial. So even though there were not necessarily many classes about that, I took every single, I tried to take those classes that were about social entrepreneurship. I tried to take other classes even at the business school to kind of just hone on these skills that would be start a business in general, right? And I kind of disconnected or geared a bit farther away from other classes that would have benefited me in the energy world or in the environmental world, right? So I kind of not necessarily gear away from that, but focus a bit more on. And the nice thing is that since I was in school, I was already on a student budget, right? I was already in a place where I didn't necessarily need much and where I could think to myself.
Except good hummus.
Except good hummus, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was easy.
Yeah.
But basically, that's where I felt, I thought to myself, how many months can I survive without a job, basically? And I put a timeline for myself, like literally how many months can I go on, how many years or whatever, without getting paid or with getting paid much less than market, right? And I had that in mind kind of just to go back to and think, okay, am I on the right track? Should I move back now or not? And that was more or less it. The rest is just kind of...
So let's talk about it like entrepreneurs. So you calculated your runway, like how much can you really survive, right?
Absolutely.
And then you came up with it at a personal level, of course, like without you, the company doesn't exist, right? So you calculated that runway. And then you started, doing some prototypes, or you started launching and sharing with friends. What was that experience like? What kind of feedback were you getting? And when did you really pivot from making hummus for friends to involving refugees to sort of make it more scalable? Walk us through the entire process.
Yeah, you're taking me so far back. I haven't thought about these days in a long time, but this is
yeah, well, that's why we have these masterclasses, right? Yeah.
There was one pivotal moment actually that I remember quite clearly. It was still very much of an idea on a deck, right? Back then, I hadn't even graduated yet, and I had a friend who had launched. He had a shop. He wanted to cater a small event that he was doing, and he asked me, "Oh, can you make some hummus?" And this is where I thought, okay, great. This is a place where I can test and see how people react. Maybe we can get some early user feedback or whatever. And I spent about 2 days making hummus because we needed a lot. I had a very, a home-based food blender processor. And I honestly did not enjoy the process, right? Spending 2 days making hummus was kind of, this is where I realized, one, I wasn't necessarily meant to be in the kitchen making the hummus. I probably needed to find someone else who is actually passionate about that to do it. So that was some sort of a light bulb. And the other thing it also made me realize is that let's maybe not stick to hummus only. If we want to get people passionate who are home cooks who really want to explore more cooking, making hummus all day and only hummus might get exhausting, right? So it kind of started from a place of, maybe we can call it empathy, but from a place where I tried it myself and I felt like this is not necessarily something I would enjoy, and I'm not sure if someone else would enjoy. But it kind of made me realize that quickly enough, soon enough, we need
you can broaden the repertoire. So to
exactly. And this is where I immediately, one of the first steps I did was get in touch with the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, which is one of our main partners today. And initially, so it took a few months, honestly, to get a foot in the door.
Yeah, you make it sound easy, but both you and I know how challenging that process is.
Yeah, it took a while, and I tried a few different approaches, a few different routes. I ended up landing on someone who took a meeting or a call, I can't remember, ended up going there to meet with them. And the point of my very early contact with the IRC was twofold. One, to validate the idea and kind of get their opinion. The IRC, maybe just for context, also for everyone here on the call, the IRC is one of the main resettlement refugee resettlement agencies here in the US. They're one of 8 or 9 agencies. So if anyone knows what refugees need, it's really that agency when they're first resettling, at least. So the first goal was to get validation from them to see what they think about the idea, if that's something that's even interesting, right? If that's something, if people would be even interested in that idea.
Right.
And 2, to see if there would be a way for us to partner and if they would be willing to kind of help us find people who are excited about the idea. And that's how it went. They did validate a few things. They did change a few things. Also, they helped us kind of reconsider some ideas we had that were completely unreasonable, right? And it was good to have a partner to think these through with.
What year was this when this partnership happened?
That was 2015, I would say, early.
Also, yeah. So roughly when we met. So 2015, you have this. Yeah, you have this partnership in place. You want to broaden the repertoire, go beyond hummus. But as I think, perhaps you can tell me if I'm right or not, finding the refugees in New York may not be as easy as one would have hoped. Or was it easy?
It was, again, through this partnership. So the IRC is in charge. Part of what they do is help refugees or help their clients find jobs, find employment. So I went directly to that employment office, and, they kind of, it's a win-win-win, right?
It gave you, yeah, exactly. So that's the partnership 101, right? How do you create partnerships that are win for refugees, win for Eat Offbeat, and win for IRC? Everybody wins. How did you figure out the business model, the payment structure, and how does Eat Offbeat work at that time?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that obviously are continuously under consideration, right? We keep changing things, we keep reassessing things. I think one thing has been clear since the very beginning. For us, we have 3 goals, right? The first is to create quality jobs. And I'll talk a bit more about what quality jobs means. The second is to build bridges between us cooking at the kitchen and our customers having our food at home or at the office. And the third, ultimately, is about changing the narrative around refugees, around immigration, mostly here in the US. But going back to the first goal of creating quality jobs, the moment where we gear away from that goal, I think this is where we would have failed miserably. So again, I always try to keep remembering this is really our North Star, if you will. And this, again, to connect it to your question, this kind of guides everything, the way we structure the entire company in a way, or the processes. So walking back from there, this is how we started setting, starting with salaries, for instance, compensation structures. We always wanted that to be above living wage, or at least starting with living wage. And to this day, all of our positions start at least with living wage, and there's a very quick room for improvement or for growth beyond that. And it's not minimum wage, right? We're starting at living wage. So that's 101. And then you walk back from there and you make the rest of the business work based on that. Because if that doesn't work, the business doesn't work, right?
Right.
And maybe just again, for context, for everyone else here on the call, this is very challenging in the industry because it's an industry that works on minimum wage, basically. You may hear now there's also a huge conversation on fast food. I won't go really there, but there's it's either a minimum wage or sometimes even lower. There's an exception for fast food employees where it's even lower than minimum wage, which to me is
many of them are immigrants, and many of there's a passport angle to it as well. We all know, read about the stories.
So definitely I don't want to go into a different conversation, but basically this is why as a business it's harder to make such decisions because you're competing with other companies that are paying actually minimum wages, and this is kind of a 20-30% usually of your expense structure, of your cost structure, basically. Wages. But anyway, there are ways to make it work, and I think we are proving that. And for me, it's really about proving that it can work, right? It's more about reorganizing, reshuffling your priorities. We rely on tech a lot to optimize some things in a way that makes it cheaper. There are other things, ingredients, where we have to be incredibly efficient in the way we use ingredients in a way that makes us more competitive from a cost perspective on ingredients, for instance, versus all of our competition, in a way that makes us be able to still compete in this market.
Yeah, it's a tough industry to serve. It's a challenging, COVID obviously complicated matters. But before we go into COVID, tell us the entire sequence. How do I find about Eat Offbeat? How do people order it? What's the role of tech? Because it's a phenomena. I mean, now you get so much media coverage here and there, and for great reasons. So the story clearly, resonates with people. But that's necessary, but not sufficient. You got to make the nuts and bolts work. You got to make the business survive on a daily basis. How do you do that?
Right. So I'm trying to see if I should tell you how things were or maybe how things are right now. Should we skip to where we are right now?
No, please give us as detailed an answer as you like. Our listeners are very patient. They want to understand everything.
Sounds good. Okay, sounds good. Maybe I'll just tell you a bit more. I kind of explain how we went about to be where we are today, actually, because there's so many steps from the moment we were talking about, from when we started, we talked about hummus. And maybe just to clarify to everyone, we never really sold that hummus per se. Immediately we pivoted, or not immediately, but by the moment by the time we started actually selling, we pivoted into something called, we pivoted into catering. So when we started the company, it was specifically to do catered events. So we were catering everything from casual meetings to high-end gala dinners for groups of as small as 10 people up to 1,000 people all over New York City. So that was in 2015, and we did that over the past 5 years. We were growing, kind of doubling sales year over year with just doing catering and specifically focusing on corporate catering. Long story short, maybe just to clarify where we're at today with COVID, in March 2020, everything changed. We lost 100% of our business almost overnight. Within a matter of a week, we were at 0%, or at zero revenue coming in for an indefinite future. As you all know, we don't even know when it's going to pick up even now, right? We have zero visibility on when things are going to pick up again. So basically it was a pivot or die situation, right? It was very clear to us immediately that we had to pivot or just close. And that's really a question that we asked ourselves a lot throughout March and April. Like, do we close? Do we even keep going? Is it worth continuing or not? Long story short, we took our best sellers when we felt like we had to do something about it, right? We took our best sellers from catering, repackaged them, repurposed them, put them in a box, and started delivering those boxes directly to our customers at home instead of delivering it to their offices. So we basically went from who are our customers, who do we have in our network today, how can we serve them? They were now working from home, so we're like, okay, maybe we can send our food directly to their home. And that's what we did. And we ended up with a new concept. That's what we call today meal boxes. So today we're a company that delivers meal boxes directly to individuals at home. That's an entirely different process, an entirely different structure. We're in the DTC business today, direct to consumer business today, versus a B2B sales structure 10 or 11 months ago, right? So almost overnight, within 2 weeks, we had to reinvent our entire process. And Utkarsh, I'm sure you know, and I'm sure everyone, many people here know.
It must have been so hard. I can only imagine, yeah.
It was hard, but at the same time, I think we were lucky in a sense that we have a team, and we were a large team at the time. Now we're a little smaller of a team, but basically we're a team of mostly immigrants and refugees. Everyone on the team has rebuilt their lives 3-4 times over. So restarting a business was not necessarily a huge feat, right? I'm not saying it was easy. It was definitely hard, but just I feel like we were in a slightly better situation than other businesses because we had a team that was incredibly resilient. And for someone to entirely change their job from Friday to the next Monday, Friday you're a driver, then Monday you're a packaging manager, or Monday you're a chef, and then on Wednesday you're a driver, or you're delivering. It just happened, and people just learned the new processes, adapted, and it was fine. Everyone was really, no one was kind of put down by this entire everything that was going around us. And maybe also to walk us back to the time, kind of explain to you, or kind of show you what was even more challenging about the time. March was a very scary time. We didn't even know what the virus was, how it was going to react. We were worried about our own health, and I personally was worried about keeping the kitchen running and having people come to the kitchen and risking someone's lives, right? So we really had to make that decision of, do we prioritize our livelihoods and the livelihoods of the 30, 40 families that were dependent on the business, or do we prioritize our health? Because at the end of the day, if we get sick, what do we do? And to solve that, we were constantly, every week, we were checking in with everyone, making sure everyone was feeling safe. We had an incredibly rigorous, and we still do, process, temperature checks, all of those things. We stopped using commute, transport, public transit. We had cars pick everyone up, bring them to the kitchen. We reshuffled shifts so that there was enough room for social distancing. Anyway, just to kind of give you an idea of the type of challenges that we had back at the time, on top of creating a new business from scratch, basically, right? Whether that's packaging, a delivery process, marketing. We didn't even do marketing and catering, right? It was a B2B sales structure, was a salesperson calling offices or doing emails. Now we had to digital market, like we had to do sales, paid sales or paid ads on Facebook, and an entirely new process. But luckily we learned that quickly, I would say, and it was very successful because we were also lucky enough to have a community that was incredibly engaged and that wanted to help. New York at the time was also very, I would say everyone in New York was really looking to help out businesses that were struggling or communities that were struggling. So we also relied on that. And that's how we survived so far. So today,
and more power to you.
Yeah, and in a sense, we discovered something that may be more scalable. We discovered the model that may be even better than catering, that we might combine with catering if and when and if catering comes back. But I think the biggest lesson here is to always stay flexible and kind of see what opportunities are here, because it's not always, and not get defeated by maybe, I'm not going to say small things, but sometimes, things that might seem like this is it, it's time to give up. Sometimes they might be opportunities, actually, that if we tackle them the right way, in the right direction, we can actually end up even stronger than where we were.
Yeah. As your fellow Lebanese Talib says, crises, there are some people who are anti-fragile. So they get strengthened with crisis. It seems like Eat Offbeat under your leadership is definitely anti-fragile.
Yeah, thank you. That definitely means a lot. But definitely, at least it feels like it was a situation that strengthened rather than fragilized.
So the adaptability of Eat Offbeat under your leadership comes up. The resilience of you and your team, largely refugees who actually don the kitchen, deliver the food, etc. Are they all refugees? And how have you trained them? Like, what does a kitchen really look like? Where does technology fit into all of this? I would imagine everywhere, but maybe you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, mostly refugees. Most of the chefs are actually, refugees by status. We're also very flexible there. It's really whoever the IRC refers to us. So if it's someone who ended up coming here as an asylum seeker, we're not really about like very strict definitions. Or if it's someone, who ended up going through the IRC, we're not really looking at paperwork and seeing exactly what status. It's not about that. It's more about making sure we're representing cuisines that are underrepresented, even in a city as cosmopolitan as New York. And it's really about opening up opportunities to someone who may not necessarily have the same opportunities somewhere else, right? So it's largely, but it's, I would say 90% refugees, and then there's another 10% who are maybe immigrants who may not necessarily have entered the US on a refugee visa, right? Which is the fixed definition. At the same time, we also have Americans on the team, right? Right now, it's a smaller team because we're restructuring. Hopefully, we're going to start rehiring very soon. We're actually going to be looking for a marketing director. So if anyone here is interested, I'll let you know at the end of the day.
We will find you your marketing director. Network Capital is a huge chapter in New York, and many people are looking to serve in purpose-driven businesses such as yours.
So I'll be sharing.
I'll get you that person. Yeah.
I'll send you a job description. But basically, these positions very often are filled by, we also don't want to have like a siloed company where we're all immigrants, right? At the same time, for marketing, for sales, for different functions, it's
of course.
It functions by having diversity too, right? We don't want to go the other way of actually ignoring
That's an interesting point.
Voices of actual Americans. So we definitely also hire locals, whoever it is. It's more about really filling the right function with the right
person.
Regardless of, without really looking on resumes. I'm really not into looking at paper. It's really not about the paper. It's really about the person and making sure we fit the right skills, the right, very often, at least for me, and I think for the company in general, it's not about on paper. It's more about what willingness to learn is, right? And if you're, you might be, actually, this is one of the examples. The head of our delivery team, he started out as a delivery, operator. He's the son of one of our chefs. He was still in school. He did this kind of as a couple hours a week on top of his studies just to get some extra money. He now runs the entire delivery team. He also runs our social media. So he's the one behind it.
Wow.
On Instagram, he's the one behind it because he's really good at it. And there's no reason why he won't. He might be doing only marketing next year as soon as we find someone to replace him, or as soon as we have room to have both things. So just to give you an idea, it's really not about what's on paper on your resume. It's more about what you're willing.
But it's about the jobs that you can do, right? Like how much hustle you have. And I also really appreciated the nuance that you added on diversity, right? You want to make sure that there's the best person for the best job. And you're doing a really incredible. And I think what puts all of this in the right perspective is the power of story as well. I think one reason why you've also been able to tell the story effectively is that people naturally resonate with it. I have always seen, even I remember the first time you pitched it at PSIH. I remember, hey, this is a very interesting model. This should exist. So how's the process of telling the story been for you in New York? Do people naturally gravitate towards it? How's the response of people? Are they skeptics? Are they believers? Are they both?
The funny thing, and I know your reaction almost, I'm not going to say everyone, but a lot of people have that same reaction of, wow, this is a brilliant model. But at the same time, the funny thing is, immigrants have been in the food industry for the longest time. Like immigrants, whenever they move to a new country, they start restaurants, they start food shack, right? It's what most immigrants do. So it's really not, and it's not necessarily to downplay what we did, right? But it's not, we didn't really invent a new concept. The only thing we added to that is the idea to do that more at a scale, right? And to do it more on a larger scale and really build into that. And maybe the only difference we have here is more about shifting the focus back to the human element in this entire industry, if you will, rather than anything else. It's more about connecting with the chef who prepared your food, rather than just ordering something online on Seamless, getting it delivered, and then eating it without ever thinking of who actually made it, who delivered the food, who prepared it, who picked the ingredients before, all of that entire process. So for me, it's more about that. And I don't think we really reinvented the wheel by coming up with the model, but it's more about, restructuring things that was a bit more innovative. But to answer your question of how the response is, most often people are like, wow, this is a great model. But then thing is, and where it gets serious is when we need to raise investments, for instance, or sometimes even when we go to businesses from a sales perspective, like when we're trying to get sales prospects. Very often they're like, wow, this is a great idea. Let me connect you. And I'll give you a very concrete example. We're talking to, give me a company, I don't know, Facebook.
Let's say ABC. Yeah. Okay.
Their director, whoever it is. Wow, this is a brilliant idea. Let me connect you to CSR. They can help you. Like, no, I'm here to sell you food. I don't need to connect with CSR. This is not about CSR. We have really good food.
There's not a chance. Exactly.
People immediately put you in the bucket of, oh, this is a cute project. And that's something that makes me cringe. It's not a cute project. It's a food company. We're selling great food. We are able to compete with the best of, corporate caterers. You don't necessarily need to see us as the CSR.
And now you have track record. Now you have 5 years of track record, 5-6 years of proven performance. Most businesses don't last this while, food or non-food.
Exactly. We're definitely competitive on that stage. And for investors, same thing, right? Immediately they're like, oh, this is cute. Maybe you should talk to this nonprofit that does this. No, we're not a nonprofit. We're for-profit. We're doing this. We are competitive, right? We bring revenue. It's good. We're bringing profit, all of that. But this is where it gets challenging sometimes when you're a social business. And I have to be very careful in how I pitch things sometimes in a way that makes us look like the aggressive business that also has a social impact. Sometimes that means I have to shy away from showing our social impact just to avoid being put in that bucket of socially conscious and not necessarily profitable.
Got it. Which you are, which is like, VCs should be flocking after you. Most of their companies that invest make no money and definitely not profit. Profit is a bad word in the VC world, I hear.
Right.
But of course, I'm not a VC, but I can have some friends. When you look at the future of your business, do you need money to scale? Are you out there actively looking for investments? What's the plan and how have you gone to? And please tell me you've pitched to Talib yet?
I have not. That's a good idea. Do you have any connections?
Well, let me connect you. Yes, please. I mean, how could you not pitch to Talib? He is in New York. He would love that. He loves hummus. Let me make that. Please do write to Talib. Yeah, he's a neighbor. I'm just surprised you hadn't done that.
About it, but let's definitely talk about that offline. But basically, we are actually fundraising right now. So funny you mentioned. Back in catering, we did not really seek institutional investment. Catering was a very comfortable model. It was cash flow friendly, right? You book a gig, you get paid, you pay, you buy your ingredients, you make it happen. So cash flow was really easy. But also on the other side, it's not necessarily a very scalable model in and of itself, right? So seeking investment for that model was a bit challenging. Back then, even when we were in catering, we always knew we wanted to scale, and we were still looking for a way to scale. So we always knew it had to be either through delivery or models that we're doing right now. But it was something that we never had time for, right? It was always like, next year I'm going to start doing that. But then you end up running the business and you're kind of... So in a way, there is some silver lining to COVID, because it kind of pushed us to actually go there. So that's why today we are seeking investment. Our model today is not profitable in itself right now, right?
The D2C model,
Because we're in the DTC, exactly. We're in the direct to consumer. We need to spend on marketing. We need to spend tremendously on tech to build infrastructure.
You don't need to explain yourself. Most food tech companies that went IPOs, they're still not profitable. So you're okay. You're in good company.
Not explaining, but just to let people know why you actually need investment, right, to run such. But that's, I mean, to your point, we are raising right now. We're raising a seed. We've closed a part of it. We're looking to close by end of February.
Lovely.
So we've
Network Capital has many venture capitalists. Let me make some intros, and I think you'll be very interested in learning about how many people would want to support what you're doing financially. So I think once this masterclass goes out live, let's attach a fundraising deck or link onto it as well. Let's do micro investment, because I really believe in what you're doing. It's not just a social need, which of course it is, but it's a huge business opportunity. I mean, for people like you and I who travel to different countries a lot, I mean, there's nothing quite like great meals delivered with a story. A meal and a story is something that one should pay for, I think.
Exactly.
So
and they are paying. We have customers who are very passionate about what we offer. So
you have a community, you have a great product, you've pivoted, you've demonstrated 5-6 years of track records. Let's help you fundraise quickly.
Brilliant.
Manal, I think as always, every time I talk to you, I feel even more inspired than before. So thank you for inspiring me, and thank you for sharing your story. We are going to go all out with it and share it on all our platforms. We're a subscription-based company, but we'll make this masterclass available without any paywalls so that it can go and be watched by everybody, because the story needs to be told. So Manal, thank you so much. And we have many boot camps, one of which is the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp and the Social Entrepreneurship Bootcamp. We look forward to having you as a faculty there. You deserve to be.
Brilliant. I would love that. And I'm equally inspired, Utkarsh, by this incredible community you have built. So,
it's one team, right? Like we're all in this together. Thank you, Manal.
Thank you.